Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. First and foremost, I want to thank you all for attending. Today, our webinar is called How to Practice Emotional Self-Care for the Holidays. My name is Carrie Cantrell, and I'm a facilitator at Circles, as well as a therapist and life coach at Carrie Cantrell Coaching. I'm so glad you're here with us today. I want to take a second and introduce myself, and then I'm going to introduce our guest today. At my practice, Carrie Cantrell Coaching, I'm all about building emotional wealth so that you can live a more balanced life and just kind of get over that mind drama that bogs you down every day. So I'm so glad to be here today with the co-founder of Whoops, Pooja. Pooja, would you like to take a second and introduce yourself and tell everybody about your company as well?
Yes, thank you so much, Carrie, for having me tonight and for everyone that's joining or is seeing the replay later. Thank you for taking the time out. So I am one of the co-founders of Whoops. We are a gifting company. We specialize in French macaroons. We were born in Bryant Park in the heart of New York City. That's where I live. I live in New York City. Was born and raised in New Jersey. And our company is going to be hitting 10 years next year, which is like a huge milestone for us. And yeah, we're really excited about this partnership that we're doing with Circles this year. A lot of it started with kind of my own mental health struggles and us realizing that we're just in a really tough time right now during COVID, where we're hitting almost 2 years. And yeah, so we are really excited to kind of give back, and we want to share the support because we know a lot of people are going through a tough time.
Thank you so much. If you are having any technical difficulties or you just have a question or comment, feel free to enter it in our chat box as we're going along today. I'm going to continue introducing our webinar today. So today we are going to talk more about emotional self-care. But before we do, I just want to tell you a little bit about Circles. For those of you who don't know Circles, Circles was created to connect you to a group of people who actually understand what you're going through. And so thank you, Pooja, for telling us a little bit about what brought you here today. We're going to hear a little bit more about that in a second, about kind of your history and your passion for this topic. But Circles will connect people that are going through similar experiences to whatever you might be experiencing. And these people truly get it. They get what you're going through. And together with the support of these people and the support of a mental health professional, you get to find this support and build resilience together and get better together, which is a great thing to have, especially during this time of year, I think.
For sure.
And thanks to our partnership with Whoops, everyone who has attended this webinar is getting a special offer. It's an offer that honestly, I was so excited to hear about. Your first 2 months at Circles are completely free when you use the code WHOOPS, WOOPS 2M, M as in Mary. WOOPS2M. And not only that, the first 50 people to sign up also get a free box of macaroons. Which, come on now. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
That's a no-brainer. So I'm gluten-free, so I love macarons. So
I don't
anyways,
know anyone who doesn't love them.
right?
Yeah,
So
I have yet
anyways,
to meet someone that doesn't like them.
yeah. So you got to take up that offer. First 2 months of Circles free, which is, I mean, also a really excellent part of the offer and a little bit of dessert for the holidays. So go ahead and check that out. But before we officially get started today, I just want to mention a few logistical things about our webinar. This is one-way audio and video, meaning that you can see us, you can hear us, but we can't see or hear you. So what that means is that use the chat box, enter your questions, enter your comments into the chat box. We do want to hear from you. We want to hear what you're thinking, what you're feeling. As we go through today's topic, we're going to answer your questions. So make sure that you put them in the chat box so that we can respond throughout the course of the webinar. And we will make sure that we address them either throughout the webinar or at the end. and potentially even email you afterwards with some of our responses. So go ahead and make sure you're using that. We're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, and I do see some of the feedback that you need us to talk a little louder, so we're going to work on that. So what we're going to do during today's webinar is we're going to do a little question and answer. We're going to learn a little bit more about Pooja and her story, because I think she has a great story that we can really learn from and kind of gain some knowledge from about how to practice emotional self-care and why it's so important really during the holidays. And then I'm going to share just a little bit as a facilitator, therapist, life coach, whatever you want to call me today. I'm going to share a little bit about some emotional self-care tips too. So make sure you hang around and get all the benefits of our webinar today. So Pooja, thank you so much for being here. Can you just tell us a little bit more about your story and what brings you here today?
Yes, I would love to. So I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression and OCD at the age of 13. So I was in middle school. I mean, that's like a hard time, let alone, without dealing with a mental illness. And I think I was just so lost, right? I was a teenager. I was just entering high school and, and then let alone with all of this anxiety, and I didn't really know what to do. And obviously my parents recognized that there was something, bothering me, and that there were symptoms that I needed to address. And so took me to a doctor and I sought help. And that was kind of the beginning of my mental health journey and my road to recovery. That being said, that was 20 years ago. And I think a lot of the things that we have now, a lot of the access, a lot of the, Instagram and social media can be really great. And there are a lot of things such as circles that we didn't have back then. There's just so many techniques and ways to, help yourself now that didn't exist 20 years ago. And so I've just learned a lot throughout my years towards recovery. And and I think especially for us, like as the holidays, this is a really tough time, right? For a lot of people. And I think, if you were, especially the holidays during COVID, I mean, that's just like a whole nother layer on itself. I think more people need help now, and more people are going through a lot. Like, let's say pre-COVID, if you were struggling with a mental disorder, or you were struggling with certain things, I think that's only amplified during COVID. And then you have people that were not struggling with any of these symptoms before, and now they are, right? The numbers are up. People are anxious if they've never experienced it before. I have like friends and family, and I hear it all around. I mean, the articles it's just everywhere, and how can it not be, right? We're still in the middle of a pandemic. There's so much uncertainty. And I just think that, when I was 13, I kept my illness a secret. There was a lot of shame. I didn't know what to do. I was young, right? So there was that, what if I'm judged? What if what if I don't get the support I need? My family knew and close friends, but it was basically that, like, I was scared to share. And I think, I think there's a power in sharing, and there's a power in talking about your experiences, because the more you talk about it, the more you realize that there's more people that share the same things.
Yeah, you are like really touching on almost like the whole purpose of circles, right? To come together and like kind of even put your toe. I always like to say that, I say this a lot probably, but put your toe in the water. It's a good place to kind of just get that first step of getting out there and sharing what your experience is in that safe circle. But I think there's so many people in the chat box right now that are resonating with you, like feeling low, feeling sad, like talking about how COVID is a factor in some of those for them, as well as other things like life events are kind of bringing them to a place where this time of year is really not feeling so great. But one of the things you said that really stood out to me was that it was hard for you when you first started having these feelings of maybe anxiety or sadness, all these things that started kind of coming out at 13, and you kept it a secret, I think is what you said.
Yeah.
And can you talk about maybe why you felt like you needed to keep it a secret. Was it, the stigma of mental illness, or, what were some of these factors that kind of created that secret for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think so. First of all, this was 20 years ago, and I think no one was really open about what their struggles were, and so I think because of that fear of being judged and the fear of also not knowing it myself, like I think there was a period where I was kind of like in denial. I was like, oh, like this can't be happening to me, right? And then once you start accepting it, you're like, oh, well, I'm the only one, and you kind of I was scared, right? I was scared of being misjudged and not being understood. Mental illness can be very complicated because it's not physical. Like you can't see I have
Mm-hmm.
a broken arm, or you can't see, like I have a really bad back if I'm punching, right? It's an invisible illness, as they call it, right? Because there were times where, no one would know anything was going on. And so I think it made it a little easier for me to also hide it. But it was just something that I felt that people didn't talk about, people didn't understand. I mean, I barely understood it, right? So for me to talk about it, like I don't think I was there yet.
Yeah.
And then once you kind of keep something a secret, it's kind of easier to kind of go with that lie, like kind of
Mm-hmm.
you're living, because
Fake it till you
you've
make
been doing it.
it.
Exactly, like you're doing it for so long, and so that kind of almost became the easier route. Although I don't think it was. Now looking
Mm-hmm.
back,
Yeah.
so that's kind of what happened.
And so, if I kind of remember your story correctly, you just kind of came out and started telling people about what you had been experiencing just a couple years ago, right?
Very recent. Yeah, I
Yeah.
just did my first podcast, which released like a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
It started with telling like my closest friends and cousins and like people that I really trust and are a big part of my day-to-day life. And what I realized was people really understood. Like I think a lot of this fear that we have about whatever it is it can really just it manifests as something bigger, because we're fearing it in our head, so it seems like it's the end of the world. And then when you kind of share it with people, they're like, oh, I totally get you, and I support you, and I love you for who you are, and they appreciate me sharing it. So there was like an overwhelm of acceptance and support that I was actually really shocked to receive, but also blessed. So I just think it's really important for people to share their story, because you kind of also give other people the kind of like the signal to also share, right? And we kind of understand that we're all going through something together.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that Barb in the chat box says it's an invisible illness and makes her feel alone. And I think a lot of people resonate with the way you said that, Barb. So thank you for sharing that line, because I think that's really true for a lot of people. Um, I think, Pooja, I also just want to say, I think some people are still having some difficulties with sound. So hopefully we can kind of work on that as we move through the webinar. We're gonna shift gears here, and after a few more questions, and hopefully during that time we can make some adjustments. So please hang in there with us if you're having some difficulties, and maybe we'll try and talk just a little bit louder for you guys. Um, so I think I kind of heard you answer this already, but I'm hearing you talk a little bit about the shift and how you really felt some changes happen when you were able to finally share your story with people and like let people in your life in. Is there anything else you want to add to kind of how you feel now versus how you felt before?
Yeah, I like I said, it was a very hard decision to decide to share, because it almost became easier not to, because you kind of live life a certain way for a long amount of time. And I think when I made that decision to share, I kind of was like, okay, we'll see where this goes. And I think it's only empowered me, and it's only made me feel stronger. and more excited to see what's coming, right? Like to help other people. And I think when you get to that point where you want to be like an advocate,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's where I am now, right? Like I want to help others, and I want to help that 13-year-old who's struggling with, it doesn't have to be the same illness, but whatever it is, I want, them to understand that they don't have to hide this for 20 years, and that they
Mm-hmm.
can share and be supported, and be loved for who they are, because
Mm-hmm.
let's be honest, everyone is struggling with something or another.
Yeah. Well, and I think Nicola has a great question. I'm not sure if it's something you're comfortable answering, Pooja, but she's kind of asking a little bit about, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nicola, but I'm going to rephrase it here a little bit. She's kind of asking a little bit about how you're doing today. Since your diagnosis was so long ago, do you still kind of feel your diagnosis today?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, right? Like when I kind of like ebbs and flows with where you are in life, right? So when you're dealing with certain things that are more stressful, the symptoms kind of get triggered, and it gets harder. And when you're, I guess a little less stressed, and I think, but I am still struggling with it today. I mean, I think I'm just at a much, much better place. I have the tools, I have my team in place, and I just know how to handle it much better.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer Nicola's question, yeah, I'm still, it's not something that went away.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the reason why we came together today to provide this webinar on emotional self care and really how to help ourselves throughout the holidays, because that's where we're all at today. That's why we're all here. That's what we want help with. So I know that you've kind of talked about some like getting to a better place where you can really manage it better. That's what you were just talking about. And so, how does self care play a role in that? How important is it for you?
It's huge. And I'm learning new things every day. I think the biggest shift for me was COVID. I think COVID was kind of the turning point, and I realized that, self care was a really important part. And it also started with I went through a weight loss journey about it was like 5 years ago at this point. And I realized that I wasn't as healthy as I thought I was. I wasn't, fueling my body with the right foods, and I wasn't moving my body as I should, and I realized that we kind of have this like one engine or this one vehicle, and if you don't take care of it, it's very hard to do anything really. And so it started really with my exercise routine, and making movement a huge
Mm-hmm.
part of my life. And so, I mean, I would say like, exercise is really important to me. I've started meditating on a daily basis. And, I looked into acupuncture and Reiki, and these are all like new things that I've learned in the past year and a half. And so, I would say that I don't think it's more of a lifestyle change. So I don't think it's something that I'm just going through now. I think it's the things that I'm going to take with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is a great time to kind of invite our audience and the people that
Yeah.
are with us, like, share your story. Like, tell us about your journey with, your mental health. Tell us what works for you in terms of self care. Throw out some ideas because you never know what is going to help impact someone else. We'd love to share some stories, kind of talk about some of your stories. If you have questions so far in our webinar, put those in the chat box because I think it's a really helpful way to kind of learn from each other. Um, Nicola, I love what you said. You said you've come a long way. What you're doing today to help others is your destiny. I admire your strengths. What a beautiful compliment, Pooja.
That's so beautiful. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Nicola.
Yes. And I think that compliment though can go for anyone who is showing up here today though, just to get a little bit more information, just to help grow themselves. So thank you. I think we should all take that with us today. Cynthia says I
Thanks,
started
Cynthia.
crocheting for my anxiety. Great. Yeah, so keep putting those in the comment box, and we're going to come back to those as we move forward into our presentation. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and jump in and start sharing some different tips that we can use for emotional self-care. Does that sound good to you, Pooja?
That sounds great.
Okay.
Barbara says positive affirmations.
Ah,
That's another good one. And I've been doing those as well.
Oh my gosh, I always have like those decks of positive affirmation cards around so I can like pull out the different cards. I think I have some like I have some crush your goals cards sitting next to me right now. 40 super inspiring quote cards. I always got something.
Yeah, if you guys haven't heard of Louise Hay, she has like a ton of books, and she's written Mirror Work and talk and I don't know, numerous other books, and she talks about the importance of like how we talk to ourselves. So it's just another resource to look into.
Yeah. I see some of you kind of sharing your stories about what is like the difficulties behind your kind of your grief, your loss, your mental illness right now, like whether it's sadness, whether it's anxiety, things like that. And thank you for sharing. That's the first step in kind of creating some awareness for yourself. We're going to talk a little bit about that as we move into the next phase of our webinar today. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to, bring up some of those examples here in a little bit. So keep those examples coming. We're going to come back to them. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and pop up our presentation for today. So we're going to talk about how to practice emotional self-care, especially around the holiday time. And really what I want to touch on during this time is to explore kind of why self-care is so difficult for us, just touch on it a little bit, and why the holidays kind of create this risky dynamic. And then we're going to really explore some of these things that you're starting to tell us now, like why, or like some of the ideas on how to help our emotional self-care. So I thought this slide was, or these statistics from Vigaro were so interesting. So this was a study that was released in early 2021. So it was based on a COVID year, right? In 2020, that was what we call our COVID, our first real COVID year. But it provided insight into what people believed about self-care. This is what people said they did for self-care. So spa rituals you'll see on here, manis, pedis, hair treatments, maybe exercising or going to the gym. It's kind of like people thought that self-care was doing all the things, and those things are really great. And there was another study that I found that 74% of people found that self-care meant to take care of their bodies. Their bodies. So these are some of those things, right? Most of the time when you get a mani-pedi, you're taking care of your skin or your hands. It makes you feel good. Most of the time when you go to the spa, you're doing something similar, or you're getting your hair done. Exercising, you're working for your physical health. Now we know all of these things have some sort of like emotional benefit too, right? Like if you feel good, your mentality is going to be good. If your body's going to be, healthy, and you feel good about your body, then your brain is going to benefit. And sometimes there is a physiological response, right? You're going to be producing like all the good chemicals in your brain, and things like that. So we're creating an emotional self-care activity through these things that help our body. But just know that most people considered self-care to be something that meant taking care of their bodies. So it was 74% that thought it was related to their bodies, and 57%, which is still more than half of the respondents, meant that it thought taking a mental break or helping their mind. And to me, that is just so interesting that sometimes we don't even think about that there's different forms of self-care. And how important what we're calling today emotional self-care is. Really taking care of our mind and our emotions and helping ourselves out when we are feeling sad or anxious or frustrated or angry, whatever that emotion is that we're trying to help ourselves through. And when we take a deeper look on why it's so hard to care for ourselves, I know that if any of you are parents out there, you're like, hello, it's because I'm taking care of other people. But I think even the average individual has a problem taking care of themselves, but some people have a much harder time than others. And the reasons for this is because we do focus on other people. Maybe sometimes in our brains, we tell ourselves that self-care has to be these grand gestures, just like those things that we saw in the last slide. It's much harder to schedule a spa day than it is to say, you know what? I'm going to choose to do something nice for myself today. I'm going to make someone laugh. I'm going to make myself laugh, right? That's a much easier task than scheduling a whole spa day that takes money and time and making an appointment. So that's what I mean by grand gesture. Sometimes self-care is more difficult if our brain is stuck in a negative cycle, meaning like, I just can't do that. Oh, that's so difficult. Our brain is thinking in a negative pattern. Self-care can also be more difficult for us if, in general, we are feeling more confused and indecisive. And the thing about all of these things that make self-care more difficult is that there's always some maybe stressor causing it or life event. We always have things going on. It's how we handle these things that kind of create this list, if that makes sense, right? So my key word lately is like resiliency. Like how elastic are you? There's things in life that make us more elastic. Like if you have a support system, you have people around you, you have someone to lean on when you need help. The more elastic we are, the easier it is to like create time to care for ourselves, to do things for ourselves. The less elastic we are in life, the less elastic we are, the easier it is to get stuck in these little categories, right? To feel like it's more confusing, to feel like it's more like it's harder to make a decision, it's easier to focus on other people than ourselves because we're just so lost in confusion. So at the end of the day, our lives have created these patterns for us of whether it's hard or whether it's easy. I see Pooja coming on.
Yeah, I was actually just trying to troubleshoot my
Your sound.
my sound. Just wondering if everyone can hear me a little bit better. Yeah? Okay, awesome.
Thanks, guys. I muted because of the dogs, and then I forgot to unmute myself. Can you guys hear me now? Let me know. Okay. No, I can hear you guys now. Thank you so much for letting me know. Okay, so what I was saying is that so the average person during the year already knows if they're good at self-care or not, right? So you know in your heart whether, or in your core rather, if you meet one of these things on this list. But then we add the holidays into the mix. And when we add the holidays into the mix, there's so many things that come up, whether it's because you're more likely to fall into the holiday stress or your family is risky at holiday stress. But these are some of the things that we often see. Financial stress, wondering if are you overspending, underspending? Do you have it in your budget? Maybe family conflict, social pressure, right? Social pressure to go to an event or not go to an event, host a huge event for your family or not. Maybe it feels like a responsibility or an obligation rather than something you want to do. Sometimes around the holidays, it's a time of reflection, right? So you think about what you've accomplished in the whole year or what you haven't accomplished in the whole year. You think about what you want to do for the next year. And that sometimes can get to people's, kind of get to your brain, cause some additional stress too. But that also even goes back to the first one, which I kind of skipped, which was reminders of what's missing. So when we reflect over the year, maybe we've had a difficult year. When we were talking about COVID earlier, maybe you've lost someone. Maybe you got sick. Maybe you lost a job. Maybe you had to miss a lot of job or time at your job because of COVID, right? So the holidays are stressful because of the holidays, because of the things we have to do around the holidays, because of expectations people set for us, but also because of all the reflections that come from the year and the things that we think about, all the commitments that we have to make at this time of year.
I love what you're saying, Carrie. I think like there's just, there's like that stress and pressure of like, we have to be happy and have fun and go to parties and, be in this like cheerful mood when it can also aggravate and like, it can make it more stressful, especially right now during COVID, right? It's, we're so used to having these traditions and doing things a certain way. And especially like in the last 2 years, I remember, my family always does Christmas Eve at my uncle's. And last year was the first year we didn't do it. And it was so sad. We did like a Zoom, holiday gift exchange, and we all we mailed presents to each other for Secret Santa. And, it was different, right? Because you don't get that human interaction. And we were like, oh, this year it's going to be, we'll be back to normal, whatever normal means, right? And now we're back in that boat again. It's like, do we go? Do we not go? Is it safe? And so all of that uncertainty, just like you said, there's like, family pressure and society pressure. It's like, and then health pressure. And we just, it's just so much on everyone's plates, and there's no right answer, right? You kind of have to figure out like what works for you, what's going to make you happy and also healthy at the same time. But there's a lot of pressure from in all different angles. So I really like, this entire topic because I think everyone can really resonate with it.
Yeah. And I think those are really great examples. And I would even add that I think some people are at like the other end of the spectrum too, where it's like maybe where they live, COVID is not as well acknowledged. And so it's like trying to make up for last year.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so it's like event after event after event after event. And like, do you say yes? Do you say no? Like, so I think there's so many different forms of stress. And that's sometimes even where we see like family conflicts come out when you have to choose yes or no, regardless of what situation it is. Thank you for those great examples. Yeah. And let us know in the chat box, like what kind of stress are you seeing come up for you at this time of year? What are you most resonating with on this list? I'd love to know. So, and I've kind of already touched on this a little bit, but the real difficult part about self-care is where these two areas meet, right? So maybe during the year, like your norm is like if you're not great at self-care to begin with, or you are really great at self-care to begin with, that's your baseline. So you already know how you manage throughout the year. And maybe it's not great. Maybe you're like, yeah, I got lots of room for improvement. Or maybe you're like, yeah, I excel. But regardless, when we add the stress on from the holidays or this time of year and all of those things on that list, it's like we just go down. And if we don't have the skills and the tools to help ourselves intervene, we're just going to keep going down. We're just going to keep not doing well. We're going to fall into our little hole because we don't have the things we need to help us climb out, especially if we're not already great with self-care. If we're already good with self-care, then we have those skills and tools that we need to kind of help ourselves rise up, right? So the challenge is really when the two are meeting and we're not great with the tools and the skills that we need. Yeah. So I'm seeing some people write in the chat box, like Paulette says, I really struggle with family conflict and finances. Thank you for sharing. Um, um, and Barb, I appreciate you sharing too. I see you saying that like there's a few factors for you, and those are the kinds of factors that I'm talking about with, maybe already feeling like your baseline is really low. So when you drop, it's hard. So Barb says she's experienced a loss in a couple different ways. So a loss from people being in her house, a loss from grief, and it's hard to when she's still in a healing process. Yeah. Thank you all for sharing. So, and this is what I'm really talking about. I'm sure many of you have seen the iceberg picture before and explained in different ways, but I really like the iceberg picture in this example because I'm even going to share an example from myself from a few weeks ago. Like, um, I was going through the holidays, getting ready for Thanksgiving, getting ready for things to happen. And I know that I maybe wasn't in my best place emotionally. I had some other things going on with relationships and friendships and whatnot, but I was managing it. I was managing it through my self care. I was managing it through exercising, meditating, giving myself some time and space. And but then all of a sudden, something that I should have been able to manage, my dad had to go into the hospital for a health issue that I should have been able to manage. It kind of just came and it hit the tip of the iceberg. And all of those things that maybe I wasn't acknowledging underneath the iceberg just kind of like rose to the surface. And it just kind of all hit me because maybe I wasn't fully seeing everything under the water. And while my dad having to go into the hospital was at the top of the surface, it really wasn't the thing causing all the problems. And so sometimes, we can be sitting there doing all the things. We can be taking care of ourselves, thinking that we're really managing our self care. But then if we're not acknowledging all of the things that are going on and creating the awareness that we need in our lives, and really kind of understanding all of the pieces of ourselves, then it can kind of come to the surface like this iceberg, or be hidden like this iceberg, depending on where you're at in your self-awareness. I'm just checking in with the comments. I have to say thank you. I've gotten a compliment on sounding so hopeful in my voice. Thank you. So I want to take a moment to reflect. I want you to all think about what is under your iceberg. So if you know up here on the surface are all the things that might be causing your stress around this holiday season. Maybe it's the party you have to plan. Maybe it is the gifts that you have to buy or that financial stress. I want you to stop and take a minute and ask yourself, what is underneath your iceberg? What are the things that you're maybe not addressing that might cause you some stress? And consider if your emotional well-being is at a higher risk this holiday season. Tamarin says acknowledgement is essential. Thank you. Yes. And if you have something you want to share or a question, go ahead and put it in the chat box. Pooja, any thoughts for you on this?
Actually, I just wanted to comment on Barbara's comment. She said, grateful journal helps. That's actually something I've been doing for a couple of years, like a gratitude diary, so that every night, just writing the things that you're grateful for, whether they're in that day or in that week. And it kind of retrains your mind to be grateful, because when you're grateful, it's hard to have, be stressed and anxious when you're grateful. So I think that's just one thing that I've learned, and I continue to do as a self-care. And Barbara, I think that's amazing that you do the gratitude diary.
Yeah, Leona does it too, it looks
And
like.
Leona's does it too.
Yeah. Oh, and thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, my dad's good.
I like what Barbara said, like just attending tonight is self-care. right? So a lot of times when you think about self-care, they're like big grand gestures, right? It's like I have to book this massage, or I have to go, on a vacation, or I need
Mm-hmm.
to do this like big spa day. You know, we think that they have to be expensive and has to take a lot of time, where I think the self-care that's the most meaningful are the little daily things that you do every day, and consistency, right? So
Yeah.
whether it's like drinking a cup of tea, and watching your favorite show for 30 minutes, or reading your book, or doing your gratitude diary, or 10 minutes of walking or meditation, whatever it is, I think those are all really big acts of self-care.
Thank you. And that's kind of where we're going here too, is like during this holiday season, I really wanted to pull out some things that give you a couple buckets that you can focus on. First, we're going to go over a couple things that are just for you, like what you can do that are just for you specifically around the holiday season. And then we're going to go over some things that you can do when you're interacting with others. And I see you guys still putting some ideas into the chat box, so we're going to share those in just a second, because I love the ideas that you're putting in there. So the first category is practicing healthy habits. So we've talked about some of these already, just the basics, right? Exercise, meditation, even eating healthy. I know that sounds kind of contradictory for this time of year, but the more that we put some of those like sweets and things into our mouths, like the more that it might kind of like be a distraction to our body for the things that we actually need. I know I forget how much I need just more water at this time of year, for instance, and that throws me all off kilter. Listening to music is great. You don't need all the holiday music, but just music can help lift your spirits, especially if it's something that helps you understand your emotions and how you're feeling a little bit more. Taking a walk, calling a friend, and even learning a new skill can sometimes be good, because it helps uplift your who you are. It helps you understand who you are. It kind of helps give you that moment where you can give yourself a pat on the back and say good job. um, the second bucket here is really making sure you're talking to yourself kindly. So, reducing any kind of self criticism that you're giving yourself. You guys were talking about the gratitude journal. So, finding opportunities and moments to give yourself gratitude and appreciate yourself. It could be through a journal, it could be through a gratitude jar where you just write something down and like throw it in. It could be like writing on your mirror, like how awesome you are, so you see it every morning. And it can even just being like at the end of every day saying, did anybody tell me how much they appreciate me today? Like, because I'm pretty awesome, right? Um, and just increasing your self-compassion at the time of year. So if you don't get everything done, because it's a busy time of year, that's okay. Say it's okay. You know what? There's always tomorrow. And if I don't get it all done, nobody's gonna notice. And the third one on here, creating space. Sometimes we need to create space for healthy habits, making sure you have time to prioritize you, creating a time for creating mental space so that you can like think about the things you need to do, and really just having time for fun. Do any of these resonate with you, Pooja?
All of them. I like all of them, and someone said, can we share the slides so that they can refer to this on their own later, because I think everything that you're saying is just right on point. It could be anything like that, like learning a new skill. I think Leona says, I'm doing Duolingo for Italian and Spanish, right? Like learning a new language. That's great. There's just so many things on here that I love. And I like the time for fun, because I think as we get older, I don't know if it's all of us, but we kind of have this like sense of like, it's all about work and it's all about productivity and it's all about like, how much are we accomplishing? Or at least I know that was a big part for me. And it depends like, where you live and what industry you're in, or what, who you're surrounded by. And so we have to remember that there's always like, what are we here for? Like, what is the point of life? Like, isn't,
Mm-hmm.
we want to have fun, right? And so creating time for that and creating space, whether it's to watch a movie, or someone was talking about like shows on Netflix, or, you know, doing a picnic in the park, or, you know, whatever it is. I think it's important to do things that are fun for you. And I really love that. And not just during the holidays, but throughout the year.
Well, and I would even add on to that, like making sure that your mind says you're doing something fun. Because sometimes we get caught up in saying that, oh, you know what, that picnic in the park is for the kids, so it's a task. Or,
Right.
you know, like I'm throwing a holiday gathering for my friends, so it's a task. You know, and making sure that we're really looking at it as something fun. We're making it fun for ourselves to do those things and not looking at them as tasks. And making sure our brain is saying that we're doing things that are fun. And if you don't think it's fun and you can't get your brain to get there, then you're saying no and you're
Right.
changing it into something fun. You're choosing something fun. I love it. People are sharing fun activities in the chat box. Play with my dog or play games on my phone. Playing trivia or word games, coloring on my phone. Leona, I am with you. I love the coloring app. I'm there. Perfect. So just, you know, we've already kind of done this one. We've already kind of started sharing some of these techniques that you guys love that in those three categories. But, you know, here's some just quick questions to help you enhance your mindset. What did I do well today? How did I show appreciation for myself today? How does my mind and body feel? So each day you can kind of ask yourself those questions to know if you're doing good with your own self care. And if those questions aren't lining up with how you want to feel, try something different. So, with other people, and I think this is one category we really have to, and not only do we have to think about these things all year, but especially during the holidays when we're around other people, we're working with other people, we're going to gatherings or trying to decide if we're going to gatherings. Um, Acknowledge and speak your needs. So, make sure you explore and understand what your needs are. And then when you go to express them, use first person communication. And what I mean by that is saying like, I can go. I can't go. I need this. Not you invited me and I can't go. Because when we do it that way, it doesn't always work for us in the end of the conversation, right? So making sure you're using first person communication. I feel, you know, because that will help us. Make sure you prioritize what's important to you. Sometimes we do have to do things for other people because the other people are important to them, but make sure you're framing it as this is important to me because I care about them, right? Avoid comparisons and expectations. Is what I'm doing like equivalent to A, B, and C, right? Is this just as good as that? So that's what I mean by comparisons. We often are trying to make sure that we are like meeting a certain standard. We're meeting a certain expectation. Make sure that you're just trusting yourself in the process. The second bucket here is maintaining your self identity and continuing to build it. Many of you have told us so far in the chat box today that you've lost someone, that you're grieving something, that maybe you've broken up with someone and you're going through heartbreak. Maybe you're just you're going through a period in your life that's really rough because of um, you know, depression, anxiety, another diagnosis, whatever it might be, your self identity is super important. So when you go into the holidays, you know, avoid trying to do something to fit in or please other people. You know, try and figure out who you are and what's important to you. So, and that kind of goes back to the first one where we're acknowledging and speaking our needs, but this time you're really focusing on your self identity. It's all about just showing up and being your authentic self. And it's okay to, if you're a different person than other people, be that different person because these times are opportunities for growth. When you kind of like just show up and be yourself, because I bet you in the end, other people are going to love you in your authentic self. And both of these first two buckets kind of come back to the third. Practice saying yes and no. We hear all the time how much it's important to say no because it's about setting boundaries and communicating our needs and wants. Really, this whole thing with other people is setting boundaries. So we hear about saying no all the time, but I also want you to say yes. I want you to say yes. I want you to get out there. I want you to create some personal growth by saying yes. So it feels scary, it feels nervous, but you think you want to do it. I want you to say yes as well. I want you to say no when you really don't want to do something, but I want you to say yes when you're unsure and you think you want to do something, because that helps you create personal growth and make sure you're creating your own personal space when you say no. Pooja, are any of these ones that you might be practicing this year?
I love the setting boundaries. I think that's a really important lesson that we all, uh, learn at some point or another. And I
Mm-hmm.
think for me, that was really important. There's always the guilt, right? And that, trying to do things because you want others to be happy and you want the people around you that you love and care about to be happy. But that also comes with sometimes doing things that you're maybe not so keen on, or you're maybe like, well, I don't really want to do that. And so I think it's really important, like you said, to practice saying yes and no and just setting boundaries, but also communicating like why you're setting, like not just saying like no, but even knowing like, okay, well, maybe this event or whatever, let's say it's a party or a gathering and you're like, I don't really feel comfortable, or I just think it's such a big part of personal growth is when you realize that certain things are just not for you, or
Mm-hmm.
certain people are not for you. And
Mm-hmm.
I just love that one. And I don't think it's like I think it's a life lesson that you
Mm-hmm.
continue learning, right? It's not a one day thing. So I'm still working on that. And I just
Yeah.
think boundaries are really important.
And I think sometimes people get so caught up in the word boundaries. And just remember, it's like a rule or a guideline you set for yourself, something you want for yourself. And you don't always have to give everybody the whole story as to why, like
Right.
why you're saying yes or why you're saying no. And a good way to like compromise, especially I think where you said like sometimes we do it for other people because we like love and we care about other people. And so we like are unsure because maybe we don't really want to do it. Um, I think a good way to kind of navigate those is to maybe make a compromise. So like maybe you're not interested in going over to somebody's house because it's really late or it's on a day that's not convenient for you. So maybe you could say like, no, I don't really think I could do that, but hey, do you want to grab lunch on Friday instead? And so finding a way to compromise is a really great way to still stay connected this holiday season. Great. And so share in the chat box how you plan on setting maybe some boundaries or speaking your needs with your family members and loved ones and friends this holiday season. Share in the chat box with us. I want to know. But I also put some questions here to help enhance your mindset. Where do others cross my boundaries? What can I say to my friends and family members to express my need? Is there something I can do for myself when I'm struggling with other people? Am I doing things I enjoy? So I want you to remember those questions when you're moving into the holiday season. These are ways to kind of check in with yourself to see if you're caring for yourself when you go into your interactions with other people. That's a great question, Cheryl. How do you tell your loved ones no when they're just trying to help you? I think something to remember is that we don't have to accept help from others, but it is good to check in with ourselves to see if we need help from others and we're just kind of like not sure if we want it, right? So sometimes we can tell them, we can make a compromise with them, like I was just saying, like, um, I really appreciate your help. I don't need help with this, but hey, could you do this instead? So, maybe if they're trying to, like a holiday example, maybe if they're trying to like come over and help set up and, do this and do that, and it actually stresses you out more, you could say, no, I don't really need help with this, but hey, could you bring some fruit? um, but, it's all about kind of figuring out the right wording to let someone say no, but still help them fulfill whatever, maybe need they have, but in a way that doesn't impact you in a negative way.
And I think just like appreciating, right? Like telling them like, I appreciate you wanting to help and reaching
Yeah.
out. Like that means a lot too. And just be like, maybe right now I got it. It's under control, but definitely next time. Or if I do need help, I know who to reach out to. So those are also good ways to go about that.
I actually really like that too because it's a really authentic way. It's really honest. You're
Yeah.
communicating effectively. And sometimes I think people just need that open, honest communication,
Yeah.
and they're just trying to be nice by offering. Yeah. So I really love this quote. It's a Dr. Seuss quote, but I think it really resonates with everything we're talking about with self-care. Be who you are and say how you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. And that
Oh,
actually
I
even
love that.
resonates with what we were just talking about. Those who offer, who are offering to help.
That's so beautiful. I love that quote.
Yeah.
And I think it just like goes back to like, if you're struggling with something, or if you're scared to talk to people about it, because you're scared of being judged, or for whatever instance it is, I think this quote kind of like hits right at home, right? Because you know that the people that like love you and care about you, and they're going to be there no matter what. So, and if there are people that don't understand, and then maybe they're not, it wasn't meant to be, right? So I think that's just like those who really matter to you, and most often than none they will understand like what you're going through, or they'll try to understand. So
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, perfect. So if you have any final questions for us today, make sure you go ahead and throw them in the chat box. Do you see any questions, Pooja, that you're wanting to talk about?
I think someone says, how do you tell work people that they are mean and that they're hurting my feelings all the time? That's from Jennifer. That's a good one. Um, I I guess, I mean, it depends. I think I always believe honesty is the best policy, and I think just telling people, because I think sometimes people can also, everyone has a different personality, right? And some people may be used to being more abrasive, and that's their nature, or that's just the way they go about doing things, when a lot of others are more sensitive and more empathetic, and so they may not know that they're hurting your feelings. And if you're honest with them and just tell them that like this is really bothering you, like I think you may be surprised. They might be caught off guard, and they may be like, oh my God, like, I'm so sorry that I was doing that. Um, that would probably be the best case scenario. But I just think, letting them know, because they may not even know that they're hurting your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do know they're hurting your feelings, then I definitely think bringing it to their attention and letting them know that it's not okay, right? That you're in a professional environment, and you're trying to keep things professional. I'm not sure where you work, or what the environment is like, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that's super important.
And I think what you just said is a great first step to setting boundaries. And then there's some follow-up steps you can do when things like that don't work, like boundaries you can set within yourself about how you put yourself in situations. But yours is a great first step. And then you kind of take it from there about how you move within those situations. Great question, Jennifer. So, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today. So, I just want to take a moment to thank Pooja for being here today, and just kind of thank all of you for attending our webinar as well. And just know that you guys are all not alone in the way you're feeling. And here at Circles, this isn't here at Circles, we create places for you all to connect with other people who are feeling just the way you are, who are feeling more stress around the holidays, who are struggling with grief and loss, and whether it's heartbreak or the loss of a loved one. And so here at Circles, we connect you with people who know exactly what you are going through in these groups with mental health professionals like myself, and hope that you will join us. And so don't forget that today we do have a special offer for you. If you use the code WOOPS2M, that's WOOPS 2M, then you will get 2 free months of Circles free, as well as the first 50 people who use the code will get a free box of macaroons from Whoops, thanks
Yes.
to Pooja and her company.
Thank you so much, Carrie, for having me, and
Yeah.
for everyone who joined in. And I think it's so important, like you said, that with circles, it's just you're not alone, right? That's the message, that everyone is going through something. And when you find people that you connect with, that you can also talk about your struggles with, it just makes the healing process so much better. And, just makes recovery so much better and easier. So thank you again for having me, and to everyone who tuned in.
Yes, thank you all again. And you will receive an email shortly with all the details, including the offer information, so you can start the holidays and 2022 even better and feeling better. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Have a good evening, guys.